Hey everybody, before the podcast starts, I just wanted to just say sorry for not making any episodes in the last week or two. I've just been kind of spending some time to myself and kind of just regrouping and just chilling, but also kind of took a break because there wasn't a UFC event last week, and I just kind of wanted to make sure I had a lot to talk about when I come back. And trust me, I do. I do have a lot to talk about today in the episode. So just before the episode starts, I just wanted to say, that's what was happening with me, and that I'm back now, and I'm going to try to do my best to keep steady on all of the episodes. I may not be doing the minis as much because I want to focus more on this. But anyway, without further ado, let's get on with the podcast.
You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, everybody? It is Dillo, and welcome to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Today is episode 26, I believe. I know it's been a while since episode 25. I'm sorry for that. I explained earlier in the podcast what happened, so I'm not going to waste any time going into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. I'm just going to name a couple things off. So obviously we've got the UFC 260 review I got to go through because I didn't get to do that the weekend of UFC 260. We've got, what's next for the guys who won in the main card and everything. Then we've got a much more disturbing story, but, nothing like harrowing, just more disgusting than anything. We're going to talk about CFFC 94, just one thing from that. Then we'll talk about the main event of Bellator 255 and 256. And then we've got a couple of other things to talk about, and I'll get into that in a bit. But to start things off, obviously, we're going to start things off with UFC 260. So where do we start? We're just going to start with the whole main card. The main event, obviously, being Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou. And I think at this point, everybody knows what has happened, so I won't waste any time. Jamie Malarkey came in and opened up the card with a spectacular 46-second knockout of Kama Worthy. And then the next fight, the only fight to reach a decision on the main card, actually ended up being rather fun between both fighters, Jillian Robertson and Miranda Maverick. Miranda Maverick showcasing her crisp striking, her incredible striking, her pressure game, and she had some great ground game as well, fending off Jillian Robertson's, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and everything. And that was, that was not just it. So that fight was fun as fuck. It had everybody pumped up. And then Sean O'Malley came in, making his return since his loss to Chito Vera against Thomas Almeida, and this fight made me really sad because Thomas Almeida used to be something. He was 22-1, 22-0 coming into the UFC, and he has suffered 4 straight defeats, or he was 21-0 coming into the UFC. He suffered 3 straight defeats or 4 straight defeats, or I think it was 3 defeats, and then he got a win, and then suffered another defeat, and now again he got dropped twice really bad in the first round, and then the second round he kind of survived, and then the third round it was over. Sean O'Malley he pretty much was merciful to Thomas Almeida. He could have just continued with shots, but he just was one-shotting it. The whole fight, honestly, Sean O'Malley could have finished the fight way earlier in round 1. He had him really hurt twice, but of course Sean O'Malley just tried to do the whole walk-off bullshit and fucked up that chance, but it didn't change the fact that Thomas Almeida was hurt throughout the entire fight, and Sean O'Malley ended up finishing the fight in the third round by just knocking Thomas Almeida out cold. It was really sad to see, in my opinion. But then the co-main event came, and I talked about this in episode 25 about the co-main being do or die for Tyron Woodley. And it is, because he has lost what is it, 15 rounds straight now, and he really hasn't looked his best. He hasn't looked his old Tyron Woodley self, and it's been really depressing to see him fight. He got completely dominated by Usman, and that was how Usman won the title. And then he went and fought Gilbert Burns and got completely dominated for 5 rounds against Gilbert Burns. There wasn't even a moment in the fight that he had. And then a little late for it, but he faced his heated rival in Kobe Covington and got completely dominated for 5 rounds until late in the fight. He kind of verbally tapped due to like a rib injury and got finished via TKO in that sense. So going into this fight, people were wondering if, Tyron Woodley was going to bring it or if it was going to be the Tyron Woodley of new and he was just going to get completely dominated for 3 more rounds. Yeah, no, that didn't happen. I was actually really happy with how the fight ended. It was 1 round. Unfortunately, Tyron Woodley didn't get the win, but how he fought was very similar to Tyron of old. He came out swinging, throwing those bombs. He had Vicente Luque hurt. And then Luque survived, came back with his own bomb, and just hurt Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley was on wobbly legs, and Luque just started flurrying him, but Woodley survived for a bit, and then it got to the ground, and Luque started beating on him some more, and locked in like a rear naked, but not really a rear naked, like a neck crank, and Tyron Woodley tried to scramble, which caused Luque to kind of transition into a Darce choke, and yeah, he got a Darce choke submission win against Tyron Woodley. But that being said, I don't think the UFC is going to cut Tyron Woodley for this one because he actually showed he was exciting. It was like Tyron of old. He was throwing bombs. He wasn't gun shy or anything, and he was moving forward. He took the risks, and yeah, of course, taking the risks didn't work out for him, but it made for an exciting fight, and it showed that, this is why we pay Tyron Woodley what he's paid, because he brings the exciting fights. They didn't know what he was paying or what they were paying for before. He had nothing but boring fights except for that Darren Till fight, and then he got dominated for 15 rounds straight, right? So, I don't know. I haven't seen anything as of today recording, which is April 11th. I haven't seen anything about Tyron Woodley being cut from the UFC, so that's kind of a good sign. However, it was a great win by Vicente Luque. A very fun fight by Tyron Woodley. It was really exciting. So that leaves us with the main event of UFC 260. So this started out exactly the way I thought it would be, with Ngannou coming out swinging and Stipe getting clipped and surviving and then going for takedowns. And he managed to get Ngannou to the ground, but I think it was against the fence, if I remember correctly, and Ngannou managed to get back up to his feet. And honestly, Francis kind of improved. It was very clear that he improved on his wrestling game, because after that, every time Stipe would set up a takedown, Francis did a very good job at getting out of the way or defending it and sprawling. So that was really good on his part. And the fight was kind of like that for the first round. And then the second round came, and they were coming out, and Ngannou clipped him again, but started backing him up, and Stipe recovered. So Stipe started moving away from the cage, and they were going to the middle again, and Stipe hit Francis as he was backing up with like a left hand or something, and got too overzealous. He even admitted that he thought he hurt Francis and got too overzealous, and then went in, started swinging, trying to finish Francis Ngannou, which that's not something you do against Francis Ngannou. That is a no-no. And that allowed Francis to counterpunch and hit him with a nice shot that just dropped Stipe on his back, like made him land on his knee very awkwardly. It kind of made me hold my knee because, I've mentioned it quite much before. I had an ACL injury. I fell like that, and that's how it happened. So I kind of feel his pain. Hopefully he didn't. I don't think he did anything to his knee. I think his knee is fine. But yeah, and then he got a follow-up shot before Herb Dean could get in there, but a lot of people were saying that Herb Dean had a terrible stoppage there. The thing is, I get where your guys are coming from, but he stopped it as quick as he could. The only issue it was a late stoppage in people's opinions was because Herb just was a little farther away from the fighters than some people agree he should have been, which I don't particularly agree with that, because you try standing very much in between Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic as they're striking. I'm not gonna, and I doubt you're gonna, because you're going to get cold clocked by either one of them. It's going to be severe brain damage for sure. So it was a great stoppage in my opinion. Unfortunate for Stipe, but Cameroon has a champion now. And I believe this is the 3rd African champion in the UFC, and there's 3 in a row now, because we've got Izzy, we've got Kamaru Usman, both of which are Nigerian, they're not, they don't live in Nigeria, but they were, I believe, born in Nigeria, and they are of Nigerian descent. And then we've got Francis, who is Cameroon born, Cameroon raised. Like, he got big and bulky because of, living in Cameroon and doing hard labor and stuff. So it's just very exciting to see where the divisions are right now, and I'm so excited to see Francis Ngannou as the heavyweight champion. Obviously, I wanted the good old American boy Stipe to win, but I wasn't mad that Francis won. I was really happy for him. He's like the nicest guy in the UFC, and he's just such a gentle giant, but he can kill someone with those hands. And I'm so glad that, the heavyweight division, it's nice and, kind of shooken up now. Although there's been some talks, and Francis Ngannou wants John Jones, but John Jones is being very difficult. And I guess this is what's going to bring us into the what's next for the UFC 260 winners. So we'll start with the main event because I'm already talking about it. John Jones, kind of immediately after Francis winning, started demanding way more money for the Francis fight. And although I would agree in the long run for John Jones, because he used to be a draw, at this very moment, he's not so much a draw as compared to Conor and, other fighters. So, though John Jones is a great fighter and he's undoubtedly the GOAT, he was asking for what people were thinking a little too much, and I kind of thought it was a little too much. But I see where he's coming from. He's always been the company man that has accepted his low pays. I mean, he's never really been low pay, but you know what I mean? And now he wants his earned due, especially when you're stepping in against a killer like Francis Ngannou. But the way that these negotiations have been going recently haven't been looking too bright for us. And that's just a very much understatement, because it's pretty much seems like it's not going to fucking happen, which is really upsetting. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon until Uncle Dana decides to kind of, kneel down and say, okay, John, I'll give you what you want, which I doubt Dana will ever do. He's not the type of guy to do that. However, that begs the question, who's next for Francis to defend? Obviously, you could do a Stipe Miocic rematch, but obviously, I'm pretty sure Stipe said he didn't want that right away, and he knocked Stipe out. There's not really much for a rematch. The trilogy is there, that is true, but not right away, I don't think. Stipe wants to recover, and I'd like to see Stipe go up against someone in the top 5 or something to get his shot back at the title picture. I'm not saying he needs to win like 2 fights. He just needs to fight 1 fight and win. He doesn't even need, he doesn't even have to win convincingly. Just win, and then he can get that title shot back. But a lot of people were saying Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou 2, which, if you guys don't know, that fight happened all the way back in 2018, and it was absurdly boring for 2 guys who are known for their knockout power and their exciting fighting style. It was both guys. I mean, obviously, Derek Lewis was a bit more active, but both guys were just as gun-shy as ever, barely threw anything. Derek throwing a little bit more than Francis, and it was just constant stalling, both guys just waiting for each other to throw, and it was just so fucking boring. But that being said, now that Francis is the champion and he's a lot more improved now. He's a lot more confident in his skills, not just his striking. And Derek Lewis got his back surgery, so he's feeling a lot better now, and he's apparently the master of just get up. So it is an exciting matchup, but Francis Ngannou turned it down. It was supposed to happen sometime in July. They were trying to schedule it for July, and he just straight up turned it down and said no, doesn't want that, not interested. So that really does beg the question, who's next for Francis Ngannou? There isn't anybody in the top 5 that I can think of right now, unless you want that Stipe Miocic rematch or the Derek Lewis fight, because John Jones, from the way it seems, he's not even going to fight a fight at heavyweight, and they want to make his first fight at heavyweight for the title, which is a little stupid in my opinion, but at the same time, like, it makes sense because he's the greatest light heavyweight there is. But he doesn't want to do it because he's not getting enough pay. So it's kind of up in the air right now. It's a little about what's going to happen with the heavyweight title. All we know is Francis Ngannou is the champion. So anyway, That being said, we'll go to the co-main event now. Vicente Luque beats Tyron Woodley via submission in the first round, and it was an exciting fight all around. What should be next for Vicente Luque? He's definitely earned his spot in the top 10 now. Like, he's definitely shown that he can stand and bang with these guys, especially against Tyron Woodley, and a Tyron Woodley of old at that. Like, it wasn't even a washed Tyron Woodley who was gun shy and was scared to do anything. Like, Tyron Woodley made the risks and actually had Vicente Luque hurt, but Vicente Luque has a chin of granite and a cardio of inhuman proportions. So, you can't just finish Vicente Luque like that. So what's next for him? I'm not going to name anybody specifically, but I'd like to see him against anybody in the top 10. Maybe get that top 5 spot, face somebody in the top 5. It's welterweight, so, you kind of have to look at the rankings here. He could have, a Damian Maia matchup if it's there. That'd be an easy win. Actually, I believe he already faced Damian Maia, if I'm correct. He knocked him out. But there's also like Kobe Covington, who seems to be ducking a lot of people recently, but definitely no title shot or anything anytime soon, especially with some of the news that we'll get into later, and we'll talk about it. But honestly, I just want to see him up against anybody in the top 10 or the top 5. I want to see if he can continue to hang with these guys. If he could hang with Tyron Woodley like that, I want to see what he's capable of, because every fight he just seems to be improving more and more. So it's really exciting. That brings us to Sean O'Malley's fight. What's next for Sean O'Malley? Maybe a rematch against Chito Vera. A lot of people are wanting that, and I can see why it would be there. I think Chito Vera beat him soundly. Obviously, he had that freak kick to the perennial nerve, but, that's a legit fucking tactic. Some people know where it is and aim for it specifically because if hurt, not damaged or broken, but if hit, it can numb your leg and it can just shut down your leg for a moment. So it was a legit way to win, and then he had him genuinely stiffened out and knocked out with elbow strikes once he got on top. So he did end up beating Sean O'Malley, but like I said, the rematch is there. Sean O'Malley's been calling for it. A lot of Sean O'Malley fans have been calling for it, but I don't think Chito Vera is all that interested. I'm sure he would accept it, but I don't think he's all that interested. That's behind him now. I saw something, however. Sean O'Malley calling out Dominic Cruz. That would be an interesting fight because Sean O'Malley is a long and lanky striker. Not the best on the ground. He's got good submissions, but, he's a striker. He's a kickboxer, very dynamic, good footwork. And against somebody like Dominic Cruz, who's obviously very undersized compared to Sean O'Malley, but has this wacky footwork that's so unpredictable and hard to tell. Like, it'd be such a fun fight, and it would probably be a good experience for Sean O'Malley because Dominic Cruz has to be one of the smartest minds in MMA today. And going against him and, cracking that code would be big for Sean O'Malley. So I'd love to see that fight, personally. That being said, we will go to the second fight on the main card, the women's flyweight fight. Miranda Maverick, what's next for her? Not much to say. They've already announced it. She is scheduled to fight Macy Barber, and I think that's just hilarious because at this point it seems they're throwing Macy Barber to the wolves because I don't see Macy Barber winning that fight at all. She couldn't even beat Alexa Grasso. She got completely dominated by Alexa Grasso and was shadow boxing the air for 15 minutes. And before that, she got dominated by Roxanne Modafferi. So I don't see her beating Miranda Maverick. I don't see her beating Miranda Maverick at all. But that's what's next for Miranda Maverick. Like I said, not much to say. They've already scheduled a fight for her. So, like I said, not much to say. That being said, the only one that I don't know what to do with personally is Jamie Malarkey because he's in such a stacked division. He beat a killer in Kama Worthy, and it was a great showcase, a 46-second knockout where he just waited for the perfect shot and countered. But like I said, it's such a stacked division. There's so many names to name out, but I just can't think of one because there's so many guys in that division, even unranked, that are so fucking good. So, honestly, maybe give Jamie Malarkey a top 15, somebody outside the top 15. That's all I'm going to really say because I genuinely don't know what to do with Jamie Malarkey, honestly. Like I said, he's in such a stacked division. The lightweight division is so fucking stacked in the UFC. it's not even funny. So anyway, that's it for the UFC 260 winners. To kind of just get into the next thing, because that's it. What's next for the UFC 260 winners? Before I get into the Bellator reviews, I named something else that was quite disturbing. And I'm going to talk about it real quick. It's not going to take much time. Knowing me, though, I'm going to ramble on, and it's going to take a lot of time. But anyway, so at CFFC 94, about, I want to say last week, as of recording this, last Friday, I believe, or something like that, CFFC 94 happened. And during one of the fights, it was a about between, what's it called? I'm trying to figure it out. I believe it was a fight between Kitag Pliev and Devin Goodale, I think the names were. I might have to quickly check that, but I think I remember the guy's name being like Pilev or Kilev or something like that. Anyway, it was about between them, and during the fight, I guess he had blocked a kick or maybe landed wrong on his finger. I believe it was his ring finger on his, I want to say his left hand, maybe his right. But it was his ring finger, and I guess he either blocked the kick with the ring finger and it dislocated the ring finger, or he landed wrong on it and it dislocated the ring finger, but he didn't think anything of it. And then going into the second round, something happened, and I don't exactly remember what happened, but something happened where the finger, which was already dislocated, bent back and got torn out of the socket and off the hand clean, and the man lost his ring finger mid-fight, clean cut off. Now, the good news is that he got it reattached, which is cool. Very cool. Cool. Yeah, but he got it reattached, so he's got the ring finger again. But that is just some of the crazy shit that can happen in MMA, folks. People lose teeth, people fucking break bones, and apparently now people lose fingers clean. That's cool. But anyway, I just wanted to talk about that because that was pretty fucking crazy, and it was like the talk of the town for that week. But anyway, I guess we'll get into the Bellator 255 and 256 reviews, so we'll just do that in a quick second. Alright, so as normal, I'm not going to cover the whole card. With Bellator 255, I'm probably just going to cover the main event and the co-main, I believe, because there was a Gracie brother that fought, and the Gracies made the UFC, so let's just talk about them. Anyway, so the Bellator 255 main event was a featherweight Grand Prix title semi-final, and to this day I like their tournament format. I like how often they're doing the tournaments now. I just don't understand how it works with the champion in play. Every time the champion fights, the title is on the line. So if somebody beats the champion out, they hold the title. But also, if you win the Grand Prix, you get the title. It makes sense, but it's just weird to even include the champion. Like, why not make $1 million and then the winner gets to fight the champion in like a big, pay-per-view main event or something like that? Because I don't think Bellator does pay-per-views anymore. They did it once with Bellator NYC, and that was it. And I didn't even pay for it. But that was a pretty good card. I actually enjoyed the Bellator pay-per-view. Anyway, that was the main event, and it was the Featherweight Grand Prix semi-final against with Patricio Pitbull, which I think right now he's up there in one of the best featherweights out there. And he was up against Emmanuel Sanchez, who's really no slouch. He's like one of Bellator's top guys, and that may sound not good, but he's actually no slouch at all. He's only got 5 losses on his record with over 20 wins, and he's quite the fucking fighter, I gotta say. But Patricio Pitbull, this man, he's just on a different level. He dropped Emmanuel Sanchez and then just finished him by submission with ease and made it look like nothing. And he's just one of those guys. He was the guy that actually knocked out Michael Chandler before Michael Chandler came to the UFC. Like, Michael Chandler didn't come to the UFC a Bellator champion. He lost it to this guy. This guy is Bellator's current double champ right now. Like, they had two double champs. One was Vadim, or not Vadim Nemkov. Fuck, I fucked that up bad. One was Ryan Bader, who held the heavyweight title and the light heavyweight title, but he lost his light heavyweight belt to Vadim Nemkov. So now Pitbull is the only double champ for Bellator. But he's pretty goddamn good because their lightweight division isn't too bad either. But their featherweight division's pretty fucking good, and he just runs through all of them. And he's the guy that put Michael Chandler away, who's a top contender right now and currently fighting for the title at UFC 262 against Charles Oliveira. So, yeah, that's a pretty big win on his shoulder there. But yeah, anyway, that ended by submission. And then in the co-main event, we had Naaman Gracie against Jason Jackson. And unfortunately to us, Naaman Gracie almost had him in the first, but Jason Jackson rallied back and played his game smart. He ended up losing against Jason Jackson by decision. And that was that for the Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? Bellator 255 card. The next Bellator event was actually this week, which was Bellator 256. And this one had a lot of UFC guys on it. The main event alone was Ryan Bader versus Lyoto Machida. So we had Ryan Bader, who's the current heavyweight champion, but the former UFC light heavyweight contender, and Lyoto Machida, who is a longtime UFC contender and a former light heavyweight champion as well, going up against each other. I believe this was a rematch of their first fight that I think Lyoto Machida won, actually, if I'm standing corrected here. But anyway, this time around, it was a fun fight. In the first, Lyoto Machida had Ryan Bader in some moments in the first round, but Ryan Bader doing what Ryan Bader does, he wrestled Lyoto Machida and just did a better job on the ground, I guess. That's all I'm pretty much going to say. Lyoto Machida is more of a karate style, a kickboxer. He's got, unique kicks and powerful kicks, to say the least. But he unfortunately was outmatched in the grappling department against Ryan Bader. So that's essentially what happened, and Ryan Bader makes it on to the next round because essentially the main event was actually the opening round for the light heavyweight Grand Prix they're having, which is just stacked in itself because they got the champion himself, Vadim Nemkov, and then they got Phil Davis, who's an ex-UFC guy, and then they've got Rumble and Yoel Romero, and then these two, Ryan Barrow and Lyoto Machida. Fuck me. Ryan Bader and Lyoto Machida, so it's a stacked tournament for $1 million and the chance to win light heavyweight gold. But these weren't the only UFC fighters on the card either. We had Liz Carmouche make her. Actually, I don't think this was her Bellator debut. That she had one fight before this, but it was Kat Zingano's Bellator debut as well. So that's pretty neat, and we'll cover those in a little bit. Liz Carmouche beating her opponent by decision, who actually had a very good record. Surprisingly, Bellator has a knack for putting some of the UFC people against not the best competition, but Liz Carmouche was thrown up against someone with over 22 wins under her belt, so she had a hard fight against her, but she fought a very smart fight, ended up taking that by decision. And then we had a great featherweight fight between Adam Borics and Jeremy Kennedy, which Adam Borics won very, very soundly, but it was a very back and forth fight, very fun. Now, the thing about Adam Boric is he's the guy who completely fucking ate up Aaron Pico's soul by just knocking him clean out. And I think he's going to be a big contender in Bellator's featherweight division. He's not in the Grand Prix, but I can see him fighting for the title once the Grand Prix is over if he keeps this up. But that brings us to the last fight I wanted to cover on the Bellator 256 card, which, how I just said before about Liz Carmouche's fight, that they have a knack of putting, the more, marketable names against people with kind of can-beater records or kind of shitty records. Well, if you hear that click, that's me about to head over and tell you this next fight, which Kat Zingano won pretty handily, by the way. Kat Zingano is a former title challenger, several former title challenger. She's the only, well, not the only, but she's one of the only people in the, well, when she was in the UFC, she was the one of the only women in the UFC to finish Amanda Nunes at some point. So Kat Zingano has some name value, I suppose, but they put her against a woman who was 4-2 compared to her 12-4 record. And it just was an easy day at the office for Kat Zingano. Jesus Christ, was it ever. Anyway, so she ended up winning that by submission, and she made a pretty big splash in her Bellator debut, despite it being a 4-1 opponent. She's not that experienced yet, so you throw her against a vet like Kat Zingano, like that's so weird. Anyway, so that was it for the Bellator cards. I believe they have more coming up, like this weekend or this Friday or something like that. They've got another light heavyweight Grand Prix main event, I believe, which is, I can't remember. I want to say Rumble and Yoel, but I don't think so. I'm just not gonna look that up. Fuck that. I'll talk about it when it happens, because all I know is it's one of the light heavyweight Grand Prix fights, so that's gonna be cool. But that's it for Bellator. The next thing that we're gonna talk about segues into the next other topic that we're gonna talk about. Usman versus Masvidal 2 is official. I'm not too happy about that. I mean, Usman completely dominated Jorge the first time around, and I just don't think Jorge deserves that title shot again. I think he needs to win a fight at least, because he's coming off of that loss from Kamaru, which he was completely dominated. He had no answer for what Kamaru was throwing at him, and just, pinning him against the cage. He literally had no answer for it. So, I'm not agreeing with that, but that leads into the UFC 261 preview, where, yes, you have it. Usman versus Masvidal 2 is the main event of UFC 261, but that's not the only fight we have on UFC 261, so let's just talk about these other fights here. So not only do we have the welterweight main event that's going to go on, which, again, I don't agree with, but we have the strawweight co-main between Weili Zhang and Rose Namajunas. And then if that wasn't enough to satiate your title tastes, to cap things off in the title picture, because we have 3 title bouts, we have Valentina Shevchenko going up against Jessica Andrade, the only woman that I think could actually pose a threat to Valentina Shevchenko right now. So that is going to be exciting. But to open up the card, we have Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Crute, which is going to be a fucking amazing light heavyweight scrap. Jimmy Crute loves to stand and bang, and Anthony is a veteran who just has... His nickname is Lionheart, and that's exactly what he has. He has a heart of a lion. He's just a guy who does not give up, and he's just, like I said, a veteran, so he's got that experience behind him. And Jimmy Crute's very dangerous, but Anthony Smith's still in that contention because he's dangerous as well. But that's not it. We still have another fight on the card. And I love this one because it's so goddamn technical. Because, yes, Chris Weidman is a wrestler, but I feel like Uriah Hall is really good with his takedown defense, and he's still going to prove a problem for Chris Weidman. Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman, man. We're going to see these guys finally scrap, and it's going to be fun. Hopefully it's not what I think it is deep down in my mind, where Chris Weidman's going to wrestle fuck Uriah Hall. But I'm excited. I'm just prepared for a great card. That main card is just amazing. But that's not the biggest thing I'm going to talk about today with these, because yes, 3 title fights is great, but UFC 262 has something really weird. So we just got the news later, I think earlier this week that just passed, that Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards have come to an agreement, and they are going to be fighting in the co-main event for UFC 262. However, there's a catch. It's not for a title, but it's a 5-round co-main event. It is the first 5-round non-title bout co-main event in UFC history, and I'm excited to see how that's gonna go, because Leon Edwards, he was prepared for his first, well, one of his first, no, it wasn't, it's not his first main event. One of his like many main events against Bilal Muhammad, and he didn't lose, but it was a no contest due to an eye poke. So he gets another 5 round kind of main event spot, but against Nate Diaz, who all of his fans and even some MMA fans in general have said that he's a guy who just gets better as the rounds go on. He's that type of dude that just takes the hits. He never gets finished, and the more the fight goes on, the more he gets into the mojo because his opponent's tiring out. That being said, Leon has great cardio, so it's going to be exciting how that goes. But like I said, that's co-main eventing to the lightweight title of UFC 262. And we're not going to cover the whole card. I just wanted to talk about those 2 fights. But on top of that, we have another big announcement. Poirier versus McGregor 3 is official. I believe it's going to be happening sometime in July is what they're trying to aim. July or August, something like that. But the trilogy is happening. They both have agreed to it. They both want the fight. And I'm excited for it because good for Dustin. I mean, I still think he should be fighting for the lightweight title. He's the uncrowned champ, but he's chasing that paycheck, and good for him. He deserves that paycheck. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's paid his dues. He's fought the best of the best, and he's been on top for a while. He's been so close to the title so many times, only to be beaten up by the greatest lightweight to do it. So, he deserves that payday, that red panty night, as some would say. So, I'm excited for this, but to cap things off, we're going to talk about something that I'm sure most MMA fans are not going to want to talk about, but we're going to talk about Ben Askren versus Jake Paul. So, first of all, fuck Jake Paul, so this might be a little biased, but I have a feeling that, yes, Jake Paul could knock out Ben Askren, and I guarantee it might happen, but Ben Askren has a chance to beat Jake Paul, and here's why. He's been in the cage with some of the best fighters from all around the world, in Bellator, in ONE, in UFC. The man took Robbie Lawler's punches, recovered so quick, and then had Robbie Lawler in a bulldog choke so tight that it looked like he was going to pop that shit like a watermelon. And, I still don't agree with the stoppage because I don't think Robbie tapped, but he still had that bulldog choke really fucking tight. And he took that punch like a champ, recovered so quickly. The only knockout he has is a unknown flying knee that would knock out anybody from Jorge Masvidal. And obviously he's got that loss against Damian Maia. The only issue that I have, because I do believe that Ben Askren has a chance. If he he's been focusing nothing but boxing, so he can sharpen his boxing skills, plus he's a wrestler, so he could work on closing the gap and trying to tie him up, because as long as he's a little active in the clinch and it's not for long, it's not like constant dirty boxing, he can kind of tie Jake up and close that gap, and then hit those short shots out of the clinch. But the issue that I have is he's also kind of not washed. He's just getting older. He's got a new hip now and stuff. He's had those those injuries before, so it's a little worrying considering that he's getting older. Fuck it, he is old, and Jake Paul is still very young, very much in his prime. He's my age, for fuck's sake. So I do believe that Ben Askren has a chance to beat Jake Paul. If he can take Robbie Lawler punches, he can take Jake Paul punches, I think. But I think that's Jake Paul's one chance, is to either tire him out, be smart about it and tire him out, or knock Ben Askren out. And Ben Askren just needs to close that gap and use his experience in combat sports, and just honestly, maybe his chance, like his way to victory, is to tire Jake Paul out. I don't know, but it's going to be exciting. That's April 17th. That's next weekend, as well as Whitaker versus Gastelum. So that's going to be cool. I'll be talking both of those next episode, so I'll get into that. But anyway, I've rambled too much about what I've got going on, like all the news that's happened. Let's get into last night's fights. Well, yesterday's fights, because they started at fucking 3 p.m. with the prelim starting at like 11:30 a.m. That was fucking crazy. But we're just going to be talking about the main card here, so let's just get into that shit. Alright, so last night was, well, again, yesterday, because like I said, like the main card fights happened at 3 p.m. yesterday in the afternoon. So I had like so much time to do so much else yesterday. Even during the day, like I was out and about watching the fights on my phone for fuck's sake. So yeah, it was kind of weird. I'm not really used to those. They've happened quite a bit, but not as often as you'd think. So I'm not used to those fight events. It always like whacks my day up because it's like every Saturday I always prepare my days for the nights, when the fights start at like 6 or 7 p.m. And then, I'm watching the early prelims all the way to the main card that starts at like 9 or 10. And then, I just watch that event. But yeah, no, it just fucked my whole day up. But nonetheless, we got a great card of fights. You know, it wasn't a big main event on paper, but the card itself had some great fights. The prelims had some awesome fights, like Mateus Gamrot and Scott Holtzman went at it, and it was a pretty close fight until Gamrot knocked him out. Fucking Jim Miller, the veteran himself, broke the record in the UFC for most appearances in the octagon at 38 now, or 37 or 38. Who the second was obviously Cowboy Cerrone, who's like the guy who fucking fights like 6 times a year, although he hasn't done it recently. But yeah, we had a lot of dudes on the prelims that were awesome. We had Impa Kasaganai, who came back and took a man's soul by submission very early. But, we're here to talk about the main card, which had Mike Perry on it to start it off. Yes, we had a Mike Perry fight, folks, and it was what we wanted. Mike Perry going up against Daniel Rodriguez in the welterweight division. And man, did Daniel Rodriguez come to fight, for fuck's sakes, man. Mike Perry, he was looking a lot more disciplined. He had a great team behind him. He was looking in shape, very sharp. But Daniel Rodriguez came to fight, man. His striking was looking so crisp, just better than Mike Perry's. It's just simple to say. Daniel Rodriguez was just throwing heavy strikes, constant combos, keeping Mike Perry on the back foot, had Mike Perry's nose broken again, and just, had Mike Perry hurt a couple times and just literally outstruck Mike Perry like it was nothing. Props to Daniel Rodriguez for that, and I feel gutted for Mike Perry because he felt good and he came in, with a good team behind him, a decent training camp. But Daniel Rodriguez came to fight, and he just outstruck Mike Perry the whole time, and it was a fun fight. Mike Perry was throwing his heavy shots and landing them, but it was just Daniel Rodriguez's night, and it was really upsetting. But at the same time, such a fun fight to watch. Congrats to Daniel Rodriguez, man. Like I believe, he deserves to maybe go up against somebody in the top 15, maybe test his might a little bit. But yeah, no, I was pretty hyped for Daniel Rodriguez. It was a great showcase for him, honestly, and it was a fun fight. If you got Fight Pass, go back and watch that fight. It was pretty entertaining, in my opinion. The next fight on the card, though, was, in my opinion, the unofficial baddest mom on the planet title, because it was Nina Nunes, formerly known as Nina Ansarov, but she took Amanda Nunes' last name, and Mackenzie Dern, which I didn't see Mackenzie Dern show up with her kid, but yeah, no. During the fighter walk-ins, not the walkouts, but the walk-ins, like, showing the dressing room and shit, it showed Nina with the baby and Amanda behind her, and she was just playing with the baby in the stroller. It was pretty adorable. So this fight was pretty fun for me to watch. But once again, Mackenzie Dern just showing her improved boxing under Jason Perillo, man. She came in, just had Nina on the back foot the whole time, and was just piecing her up with some heavy quick strikes. And then they got to the ground where Nina, I thought, tied Mackenzie Dern up into a guillotine, but didn't. And Mackenzie Dern just showed that she was the more superior fighter on the ground, that she was the better grappler by just dominating her, throwing strikes and opening up an armbar that was pretty goddamn tight. So she ended up beating Nina Nunes by armbar, and it was a great showcase by Mackenzie Dern. And obviously the meme was like everybody was staring at Mackenzie Dern's ass in the Venom shorts. And I have to say, the Venom shorts, not on her. I'm not being a pervert. Don't worry. The Venom kits in general actually look really fucking good. I just wanted to say that. I forgot to say that at the beginning of the podcast. this is the first event where the Venom kits are being used. It's no longer Reebok. And I have to say, man, the Venom kits look really fucking stellar out there. They look great. But anyway, going on to the next fight. This fight was awesome, okay? This fight, not just because it was like pretty back and forth and it was fucking exciting, but just the fucking walkout songs were hilarious. Had me fucking rolling, had me laughing. Because Julian Marquez, if you guys don't know, he recently beat Maki Patolo in February, and then during the post-fight callouts asked Miley Cyrus to be his Valentine, but then on social media just completely fumbled the bag by being cheesy and, like, I'm a cool dude type of guy. So, he's coming back and everybody's just, waiting a bated breath because he's a great fighter. And he comes out to Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus. And you can't audibly hear him belting it out, but you can see him melding every single fucking word for word, even with the mouthpiece in. And he's just dancing as he's coming in, and he's feeling it. It was the funniest shit ever. So, okay, whatever. He comes in with Party in the USA. And then, Sam Alvey, you'd think, he's a rough and tough guy, nice dude, family man, American as he can get. You'd think he'd come out to like some country or something cool or badass. No. He came out to Shake It Off by fucking Taylor Swift. And he was enjoying himself. He was like bobbing to it and smiling to the crowd and everything. It was hilarious. For this fight alone, the fight was exciting. Like I said, it lasted 2 rounds. It was exciting. But the fight I wanted to talk about alone, just for the fucking walkout songs. But the fight actually ended up being rather exciting, and the finish was pretty damn brutal at the end, and we'll talk about it. So these guys come into their songs, which, like I said, was fucking hilarious. And right away, Sam Alvey, he's coming down. I think this is his middleweight debut since like a long while, because he's been at light heavyweight for quite a while. He built his body for light heavyweight, so he's an oversized middleweight now. He's pretty large compared to Julian Marquez. Immediately, Julian Marquez is trying to close the distance, and Sam Alvey's throwing strikes to kind of keep him at bay, throwing short hooks and everything, throwing little kicks. But Julian Marquez is doing a good job at moving his head and staying out of the way, and then he properly closes the distance and starts throwing his strikes. He's got Sam Alvey against the cage and everything. But the fight was rather close still. Both guys were just throwing strikes in the first round, hitting each other with some really bad strikes, like heavy enough that when they landed, you could hear them audibly on the broadcast, which is what I love about no crowds, by the way. But they were really bad punches, like clear, if they hit me or any other regular person, they put them out. So, they were hitting each other with heavy shots from the fucking moment the bell rang. And, Sam Alvey started to kind of slow down a bit because Julian Marquez started to hit him with some nice shots near the end of the round and had him kind of wobbled. And honestly, he near the very end of the round before the bell rang, Sam Alvey had Julian Marquez kind of wobbled. But that being said, they went back to their corners and recovered. And then they came back in. And like I said, Julian Marquez was looking like the fresher fighter. Sam Alvey was starting to look fatigued. And they came out doing the same shit again. Barely any groundwork, mostly just, every now and then Julian Marquez would threat with a submission, or not with a submission, with a takedown, but it was pretty much a striking affair between the two. Julian Marquez closing the distance because he's the shorter fighter and just throwing these like quick jabs and these heavy hooks that were just landing on Sam Alvey. But once again, early in the second round, Sam Alvey kind of hurts Julian Marquez really bad, it seemed, with a short hook. And Julian Marquez quickly recovered, and they were trading blows again. And then they were up against the cage, kind of like Sam Alvey was fighting on the back foot up against the cage, and then Julian Marquez hit him with a nice left overhand or something when he was trying to circle away, which hurt him, which wobbled Sam. And then Julian Marquez hit him with like a nice right hook that just dropped him. And Sam was wobbled, he was hurt, fell to his knees, grabbed Julian Marquez and tried to take him down, but Julian Marquez wasn't having it. He rotated and leaned against the fence, so he couldn't get taken down quite a bit. And he started landing like heavy shots on an already dazed Sam Alvey. Sam was starting to let loose, so Julian was starting to scramble. and it got to a point where Julian just kind of took Sam's back and slapped on a rear naked that wasn't like a proper like wraparound rear naked, but he got his arm around him, so it was almost like a bulldog choke, and just squeezed. And Sam didn't even tap; he just went out completely cold. But it was a fun fight, and it got my heart pumping. And going into this next fight, the co-main event, it was great. It was awesome because this fight was already kind of hyped. Everybody wanted this fight to happen. And when this was announced, and this was like the co-main event of the card, everybody was like, oh, okay, this is a great featherweight matchup. Arnold Allen versus Sadiq Youssef. And it was such a great fight. It delivered to every standard. Arnold Allen coming in as the underdog and dropping Sadiq Youssef twice was just like complete balls to me. And he was just dominating Sadiq Youssef. He came out right from the bat, playing it very safe. Sadiq Youssef trying to hit him with shots and kicks, throwing a lot of kicks. And it was Sadiq Youssef very early in the first round, mostly Sadiq Youssef. And then Arnold Allen started picking his shots, hitting him with heavy shots, and he immediately landed a takedown. And Sadiq Youssef, struggled a bit and then got to the cage, slowly let himself back up, and that's when the striking really began. And then Arnold Allen started doing a really good job mixing up his takedowns with the striking, but Arnold Allen was doing a great job at just, keeping Sadiq Youssef backed up and landing counter shots every time Sadiq would get him on the back foot. And like I said, first round, he hits Sadiq with a right hook that drops Sadiq, wobbles Sadiq at first and sits Sadiq down on his ass. So Arnold Allen comes in and dives in on him, but Sadiq Youssef was able to survive, obviously, because we wouldn't be talking about the fight if that wasn't the case. But yeah, Sadiq Youssef manages to survive and recovers, and it's back to square one. But obviously Sadiq was clearly a little bit hurt, and Arnold Allen just started to outstrike Sadiq. But Sadiq was still throwing strikes and landing them like they were nothing, and by the end of the first round, he had Arnold Allen outstruck. But, he was hurt, obviously. He got dropped, so that was Arnold Allen's round, the first round. So I thought it was a 10-9 round. People on the broadcast said it could have been a 10-8 round, but I thought it was a 10-9 round because it was pretty close, but it was clear Arnold Allen's because of that drop, obviously. But going into the second round, both guys looked fresh again. Sadiq Youssef looked really recovered. Arnold Allen looked as fresh as a flower, and they went out and did the same shit over again. And right away, early in the second round, I'm gonna say it, Sadiq Youssef did a good job at scrambling and getting away from it, but Arnold Allen, very early in the second round, I believe it was, went in and kind of faked with an overhand and then went for a takedown, went for a double leg. But he went too high. He didn't go right at the hips. He went above the hips, and Sadiq Youssef was quick enough to get the underhooks and forced him into a clinch. But I thought, in my personal opinion, I love grappling. Like I said, I love the way it looks, how fluent it is, how technical it is. And in my opinion, that was a great fake out. He faked a right hand because he had Sadiq Youssef waiting. I believe it was he didn't wobble him, but he hurt him with a shot. And then he faked an overhand as he had him against the fence and just went for the takedown. And it was a nice little fluent setup, in my opinion. But they got quickly back up to their feet and started striking again. And yet again, Sadiq Youssef gets hit with a head kick, is kind of wobbled, and Arnold Allen rushes in and hits him with I think it was a left hook this time, that drops him yet again, and Arnold Allen just rushes him. But yet again, Sadiq Youssef recovers, and it's all Arnold Allen against the cage pretty much for the rest of the round. So it was another Arnold Allen round going into round 3. It was do or die for Sadiq Youssef, but unfortunately, he couldn't get anything done. He could have probably got the win, but he was fighting a little too desperate, despite Arnold Allen being a little fatigued now going into the third round. But Arnold Allen did a great job at keeping it a dirty fight because Obviously, Sadiq Yusuf was looking for a knockout. He was swinging wildly at some points, hoping for a big shot to land. And so Arnold Allen kind of kept it close, kind of kept it in the clinch the whole time against the cage. It made it a very dirty, gritty fight. And even though it was tiring him out, it was keeping Sadiq Yusuf from, landing those shots and potentially, landing that knockout punch. Even if Sadiq Yusuf was already winning the round, it was keeping Sadiq from finishing it because that's exactly what Sadiq Yusuf had to do. It was a great fight, though, and Arnold Allen ended up winning the fight by decision. But it was personally my fight of the night because it was so fun. It kept me engaged the whole time. Sadiq Yusuf got dropped twice and could have been finished easily twice, but recovered so quickly. And Arnold Allen played, he just fought so strategically at the end there because he knew he was getting a little fatigued and he knew he had this in the bag. So he just needed to keep Sadiq from, getting a finish. But it was a great fight. I thought it was my fight of the night. I can't remember what actually got fight of the night, but that leads us into our main event. And honestly, there isn't much to say about it. Marvin Vettori said he wouldn't wrestle Kevin Holland going into the fight. We knew that this was a short notice fight. This was originally supposed to be Marvin Vettori and Darren Till, but Darren Till broke his collarbone, so that wasn't happening. However, Marvin Vettori said that he didn't want to wrestle Kevin Holland, and oops, I think he meant to say that's all he wanted to do, because all 5 rounds, even though the fight would start on the feet and a little bit of striking would happen, Marvin Vettori would take Kevin Holland down. And it's not like Kevin Holland was being cocky this time. I just genuinely think Kevin Holland doesn't have an answer for wrestlers. I think, he might have had this invincibility aura because he had 5 calendar wins in the UFC and he was undefeated in the UFC. But, I think we found his weakness. It's a wrestler who can manage to get the takedowns because once he's flat on his back, unless he's threatening with a heavy shot, if you smother him, he can't do anything about it. Brunson did it not last weekend, but the weekend before. And then obviously Marvin Vettori just did it last night for 5 rounds. So it was a really boring fight. Everybody's mad at Marvin Vettori now. All the Kevin Holland hate from the Brunson fight went over to Marvin Vettori. I thought, it was great. And I don't think we should hate Marvin Vettori on his performance. What I think we should hate him on for is calling for a title shot when he beat a number 10, number 11, number 12 ranked guy who just lost to Derek Brunson. He hasn't really beaten any top ranked guys. Marvin Vettori's coming in beating him, and it was a boring I'm just gonna smother you fight and make it look like nothing. And now he's calling for Israel Adesanya. I just don't see it, man. I think that's the reason why we should be hating him, not his fight style. I think he fought the style that his coaches told him to tonight, and that was fit for the fight that he needed to fight. He wanted to win, so he fought the fight he needed to. But even though it was boring and I didn't like it. But that being said, I think, he should go fuck himself about that title shot. I do believe he does deserve it in a way, but I think he needs to fight Darren Till first. Do that rematch or fight somebody in the top 5 and then earn that title shot. Because he didn't beat anyone in the top 5. As much as, Kevin Holland fans like to say that Kevin Holland is great, he's not top 5. You need to prove that you can hang with the top 5 and possibly step in there with the fucking champion. So anyway, that was it for the main event. It wasn't really eventful. The other fights were great though. Obviously, the way I explained them, they were all exciting. I actually enjoyed them. Even the prelims had some great fights, but the main event was a bust. Marvin Vettori, congratulations to him for wrestle fucking Kevin Holland and utilizing the weakness that he showed against Derek Brunson. It clearly wasn't because he didn't take Derek Brunson seriously. It's clear that Kevin Holland just has a weakness to wrestlers and he needs to work on it. So anyway, that's it for today. That's it for the podcast, I guess. You guys can catch me next week on the next episode. We'll be covering the Whitaker versus Gastelum event. That's going to be awesome because those guys were supposed to fight in 2018 or 2019, but due to Robert Whitaker getting a hernia or something like that, he wasn't able to fight. And then this time around, they're finally, destined to meet up. It's not for a title, but a title shot is on the line, and I'm excited. I want to see how this goes. I think Whitaker might beat him in round 2, but I'm excited for the fight nonetheless because I absolutely love Bobby Knuckles. But anyway, I will see you guys in the next episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys have a great week. I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.